Good morning. Time to begin our Sunday morning Bible study. We're starting a new quarter and continuing on in the ABC curriculum. If you didn't get one already, there are packets out front. It looks like this, a Bible survey. And we're beginning on lesson 7. We've gone through the first 6 lessons in the series. If you're not familiar with the ABC curriculum, it's a walk through the entire Bible from Genesis to Revelation. It takes about 3 years for us to get through it. And so we're still in the Old Testament, and we're studying the United Kingdom and its kings. United Kingdom not meaning the British Empire. It's the United Kingdom of Israel and Judah, the Hebrews, the Israelites, under its first 3 kings. Last quarter, Jared Nettles did a great job in introducing the first king, King Saul, and we'll be continuing on with that, and we'll go through the first 3 kings, Saul, David, and Solomon. Before we get started, I've asked Steve Turquette, if he would, to lead us in a word of prayer. So let's all bow and go to God in prayer.
Our Holy Divine Father in heaven, dear Lord, we're thankful for your word, the blessing in our lives, your presence. And we thank you, dear Lord, so much for giving us things to understand, to know about you, for revealing yourself through your different servants. We pray that as we study today, that the things that we learn from this text will guide us to be more useful to you, more loving in this world, kind to one another, and able to be children that you can call your own. Dear Lord, we know that we fail often. So we pray that you would bless our efforts to struggle to find Christ's most holy name.
Amen. Thank you, Steve. Like I mentioned, the Bible study packets are out in the foyer. If we run out, let me know. I'll make more. This contains all the lessons we'll be covering this quarter, 7 through 13. And one thing that we're doing different this quarter, instead of having a Monday and Wednesday covering each lesson, we're going to try to cover everything on Sundays. I'm sorry, I said Monday and Wednesday, Sunday and Wednesday. We'll try to cover everything on Sundays, and on Wednesdays we're going to have a more topical study, and Dan, my son, will be leading that. So we're going to have to really go at a pretty good clip. Especially some of the lessons cover 10 chapters at a time. So there's a lot of reading material. What you'll see is there's a reading plan on the border of each lesson. And that gives you a plan, a daily plan to read through. And I would encourage you to try to keep up with the reading because there's quite a bit of it in several of the lessons. So let's see. So this is the schedule. We were supposed to begin last week, February 14th, but we didn't quite get to that because of the weather. And so we're going to have to double up at some point. And I'm thinking around March 14th, we may try to combine those lessons. So this week we'll begin with lesson 7, which is David and Jonathan and Saul's reaction to David. And the next week lesson is 10 chapters long, and February 28th and March 7th is also a 10-chapter lesson. So a lot of reading, and March 21st. So that's why I'm thinking March 14th we may double up during that week to catch up. But we'll play it by ear as we get closer and try to cover all of it. We'll be covering the remainder of 1 Samuel, all of 2 Samuel, 11 chapters in 1 Kings, some chapters in 1 Chronicles, and 9 chapters in 2 Chronicles. It'll cover the end of Saul's kingship and Saul's mental decline, the beginning of David's ascension to the throne, multiple attempts to overthrow David, David's passing and the ascension of Solomon to the throne, building of Solomon's temple, and Solomon's decline. So the first three kings in their entirety. If you like palace intrigue, dysfunctional royal families, and a lot of violence, this is a section of the Bible that you'll really enjoy. So this lesson is David and Jonathan. So last time we met, we covered David going out against Goliath. And this picks up right about the end of that in 1 Samuel 18. So let's turn to 1 Samuel 18 and we'll read the first 4 verses there. 1 Samuel 18, 1 through 4. Let's back up to 17, verse 55 to capture the context here. As soon as Saul saw David go out against the Philistine, that's Goliath, he said to Abner, the commander of the army, "Abner, whose son is this youth?" And Abner says, "As your soul lives, O king, I do not know." And the king said, "Inquire whose son the boy is." And as soon as David returned from the striking down of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, "Whose son are you, young man?" And David answered, "I am the son of your servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite." Beginning in 18, verse 1, as soon as he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was on him and gave it to David, and his armor, and even his sword, and his bow, and his belt. So here we see right after the slaying of Goliath the Philistine, this little shepherd boy, David. Nobody knew who he was. He must be some great warrior, but he was just a simple shepherd boy. And so Saul wanted to know who he was, and so he found out, and even Jonathan, Saul's son, was very close to him. So let's look at the relationship between David and Jonathan. First, who is Jonathan? Saul's son. Not just his son, his oldest son. So he'd be the heir to the throne. And who is David? Shepherd from Bethlehem, youngest son of Jesse, so he wouldn't even have been the heir to the family. And in 18, verse 23, we see it's a poor family. So here we have a royal son, heir to the throne, and a young shepherd boy, but they have a lot in common. Describe the friendship is our first question on our lesson sheet. Anybody want to take a stab at that? Lynn?
Well, they were basically like brothers. When it says that Jonathan's soul was knit to that of David, and you think of a piece of cloth where the threads interweave together to form one solid piece, it meant there was no tear or division between them. They were like twin sons of different mothers kind of thing. They were alike in many ways, including their devotion to God.
Okay, very good. Anything else? Their souls were immediately knit together after the defeat of Goliath. So obviously Jonathan had a lot of respect for David, and it says he loved him like he loved his own soul. So they were inseparable. And they made a covenant and gave him his robe, his armor, sword, and all his weaponry, his bow, in verse 3. Both were fierce warriors, and they bravely fought against the Philistines. So this is the second question. Compare the mind of Jonathan in chapter 14 with David in chapter 17. I want to take a stab at that question. Yes, Greg?
I think the courage and the faith that they had, Jonathan showed a lot of faith in going after the Philistines and putting himself in harm's way. And David did the same thing with Goliath.
Yeah, that's what I had too. Jonathan defeats the Philistines in chapter 14, verse 1, while everybody else hid. And David, nobody was willing to go up against the giant Goliath, but David knew that God was on his side, so he did. And they both sought God's counsel and gave him credit for their successes. In chapter 14, verse 6, Jonathan did so. In 17:46, David did so. So you could see the similarities in their personalities, and you could see why they would be very tight friends, like the scriptures say. So let's continue on in verse 5 and read through verse 16. And David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him, so that Saul set him over the men of war. And this was good in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. As they were coming home, when David returned from striking down the Philistine, the women came out of all the cities of Israel singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tambourines, with songs of joy, and with musical instruments. And the women sang to one another as they celebrated. Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his 10,000s. And Saul was very angry, and this saying displeased him. He said, "They had ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed thousands. And what more can he have but the kingdom?" And Saul eyed David from that day on. The next day, a harmful spirit from God rushed upon Saul. And he raved within his house while David was playing the lyre, as he did day by day. Saul had his spear in his hand, and Saul hurled the spear, for he thought, "I will pin David to the wall." But David evaded him twice. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul. So Saul removed him from his presence and made him a commander of 1,000. And he went out and came in before the people. And David had success in all his undertakings, for the Lord was with him. And when Saul saw that he had great success, he stood in fearful awe of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, for he went out and came in before them. Okay. Need to change the slide there. So describe David's growing fame in these verses. Yes, Doug?
Greater than Saul's.
Yeah. Greater than the king. Yeah. Yes, Ernie.
David behaved himself in a very respectful way towards Saul, no matter what Saul did. And God was with David, I think, and David accepted God with Saul and turned away from him. And so David did everything right in the eyes of the people. He went out victory after victory, came back, showed respect. No matter what Saul did, David still was an obedient soldier under him. And so he was building up the love of the people on him, as Saul was eating him alive.
Yeah, he definitely was not very happy. after defeating Goliath, or the Philistines, it says probably Goliath, the women were singing and saying, David's killed 10,000 and Saul his thousands. Maybe Saul should have been happy with thousands, but it kind of gnawed at him, it ate at him, that he wasn't getting the respect that David was getting. David's popularity soared not only throughout Israel and these women, but even with Saul's family, Jonathan and Michal, Saul's youngest daughter, or younger daughter, they loved David. So, and he was a man of the people. He came in and went out among the people. So you could see that he was garnering all the attention, and Saul did not appreciate that. So how does Saul's hostility begin? The fourth question there. Yeah, that's one thing, but Saul tried to pin him to the wall. The picture there kind of depicts that. If you recall, Saul had this problem with an evil spirit that would come upon him. We don't know exactly what it is. We do know that David was invited into the court to play the lyre, and I think it was in chapter 17, verses 4 and 23. Whenever he would play that, this spirit would leave him. Yes, Doug?
We need to realize, too, that this evil spirit came upon him from the Lord. God wasn't making him do these things, just like God didn't make Pharaoh act the way he did. His word hardened Pharaoh's heart. What's happening now is hardening Saul's heart. And consider the way Saul was when he was first approached by Samuel. He said, I'm the least, I'm from the tribe of the least in Israel. I'm from the least of that family. Why are you talking to me this way? He was very humble at that time. Now he's a very proud, arrogant man.
Yeah. Yeah, he started out, he was a reluctant leader. He kind of hid away, said he was from the smallest tribe, the Benjamite tribe, but now his pride has gotten to him. Yes, Bruce?
I think Paul also saw the relationship that David had with Jonathan, because as we talked about earlier, they developed such a close friendship, and I think in Paul's mind, his son should have supported him instead of supporting David, who was his successor.
Yeah. Probably the loss of his family support might have had something to do with it. Lynn?
Also, one of the things that Saul does is send David out to war. And it becomes clear in later verses that he specifically did that hoping David would get killed. And it makes you wonder if that's not where David got the idea for what to do with Bathsheba's husband.
Yeah.
So, what goes around comes around, I guess.
Yeah. Saul kind of misfires a lot of times. He would send David out hoping that he wouldn't be very successful, but instead he became even more successful, which gained him more popularity among the people and among all the people of Israel. And it says that Saul could see the kingdom passing from him and ultimately passed to David. He probably wasn't aware that David was the one who would be receiving the kingdom from him. He had been told that he was going to lose the kingdom because of his disobedience. Samuel had told him that. But he had come down with this, with these violent outbursts as a result of this evil spirit coming upon him. Again, God didn't force that to happen. Maybe He allowed that to happen, allowed these things to fester in his heart. And David had to evade being speared a couple of times. Is there any more? Oh, yes, Paul.
In verse 9 it says, Saul eyed David from that day forward, for he viewed him with suspicion. You've already had the events transpire where Saul's
Saul on top of the anger. And Saul's making assumptions that are not true about David. So his suspicion is not true. His envy is just only growing. And that's why bad things start happening.
It's a good lesson for us, too. You know, envy is a strong emotion, so we need to keep that in check and not always assume the worst. Good points, Paul. Okay, so I think we've already read through verse 16. Explain Saul's question in verse 8 related to 13, verses 13, 14, 15, 26 through 28. It's the next question. Saul had asked, well, what more can David have but the kingdom? In verses 13, or chapter 13, verses 13 through 14, Samuel had told Saul that if he had not done foolishly by not keeping the commandment of the Lord, remember that he did not wait on Samuel to show up to offer a burnt offering. He became impatient and just took it upon himself to do something he wasn't authorized to do. That if he hadn't done that, he would have kept the kingdom forever. But since he was foolish, God sought a man after his own heart. He didn't tell him who that man would be at that point. I think Saul had a suspicion that it would be David. And in chapter 15, 26 through 28, Samuel told Saul, "The Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you this day and given it to a neighbor of yours who is better than you." So the question that Saul had was, what more can David have but the kingdom? Yes, Doug.
To me, this does show that you said a suspicion. I think it might even be more than a suspicion that David's the one. And if he does have this realization, now he's trying to thwart God's will.
Exactly.
Killing the one that he thinks is going to be his successor.
Yeah. If it's God's will, you know, it's not going to happen no matter what he does. But I guess he's arrogant enough to think that he can get away with it. Sure, I didn't miss anybody. Okay, so the next question traced the development of Saul's attitude. So if you recall back in 18 verse 2, Saul was impressed with David after defeating Goliath. What was his developing attitude after, you know, this admiration of David? What other things do we see? Yes, Greg?
I had down that he became suspicious of David at first, then jealousy, and then pure hatred.
That's a good summary, yeah. Yeah, he became angry and distressed after the women started singing David's praises. He became violent. Not long afterwards, he started throwing the spear at David, even though David was there playing the lyre, trying to comfort him. And Saul became fearful as he realized that the Lord was with David, and then left Saul in verse 12 of chapter 18. But he had a fearful awe, it said, in verse 15. So that not only there was fear, but there was an awe of what he has been able to accomplish. And also I had down, as he became ever more popular and had more successes, Saul suffered David derangement syndrome. Playing on pop culture. Any more comments on that? Okay. So let's read verses 17, and we'll go through 19 verses. There we go. Then Saul said to David, "Here's my elder daughter Merab. I will give her to you for a wife. Only be valiant for me and fight the Lord's battles." For Saul thought, "Let not my hand be against him, but let the hand of the Philistines be against him." And David said to Saul, "Who am I And who are my relatives, my father's clan in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king? But at that time in Merab, Saul's daughter should have been given to David. She was given to Adriel the Meholothite for a wife. Now Saul's daughter Michal loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. Saul thought, let me give her to him, that she may be a snare for him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Therefore Saul said to David a second time, you shall now be my son-in-law. And Saul commanded his servants, speak to David in private and say, behold, the king has delight in you, and all his servants love you. Now then, become the king's son-in-law. And Saul's servants spoke those words in the ears of David. And David said, does it seem to you a little thing to become the king's son-in-law, since I am a poor man and have no reputation? And the servants of Saul told him, thus and so did David speak. Then Saul said, thus shall you say to David, the king desires no bride price except 100 foreskins of the Philistines, that he may be avenged of the king's enemies. Now Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines, and when his servants told David these words, it pleased David well to be the king's son-in-law before the time had expired. Before the time had expired, David arose and went along with his men and killed 200 of the Philistines. And David brought their foreskins, which were given in full number to the king, that he might become the king's son-in-law. And Saul gave him his daughter Michal for a wife. But when Saul saw and knew it, that the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him, Saul was even more afraid of David. So Saul was David's enemy continually. Then the commanders of the Philistines came out to battle. And as often as they came out, David had more successes than all the servants of Saul, so that his name was highly esteemed. And Saul spoke to Jonathan his son and to all his servants that they should kill David. But Jonathan, Saul's son, delighted much in David. And Jonathan told David, Saul, my father seeks to kill you. Therefore, be on your guard in the morning. Stay in a secret place and hide yourself. And I will go out and stand beside my father in the field where you are. And I will speak to my father about you. And if I learn anything, I will tell you. And Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul, his father, and said to him, let not the king sin against his servant David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his deeds have brought good to you. For he took his life in his hand, and he struck down the Philistine. And the Lord worked a great salvation for all of Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then will you sin against innocent blood by killing David without cause? And Saul listened to the voice of Jonathan. Saul swore, as the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death. And Jonathan called David, and Jonathan reported to him all these things. And Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as before. Okay, so who was Michal? The younger daughter of Saul. She loved him. She loved David. Actually, Saul had promised his older daughter to him, but for some unknown reason, he withdrew that offer of marriage to him. But instead, he offered his younger daughter, and Michal, and gave her to David in marriage. But he had ulterior motives. So maybe that's why he withdrew the older daughter. Perhaps, we don't know, this speculation, that we know that he wanted David to go out against the Philistines and get killed, and maybe when that didn't happen, he kind of rescinded on his agreement there. But then, yes, Ernie?
It also seems like Saul loved Saul a great deal too, and he thought that he could work through her to get David
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he definitely thought that he could manipulate her into putting David into a situation where he would get killed. Yeah, so, yes, Doug.
Saul reneging on giving his oldest daughter to David is no surprise because later on, after Jonathan has the talk with him, he swore that David wouldn't be put to death.
Exactly.
And he goes back on that oath that he had made.
Yeah. Yeah. Saul's not a very reliable character, is he? Yeah. Yeah. So after more victories, the harmful spirit returned to Saul. Saul tried to spear David again, but was unsuccessful. And David had escaped. And so Michal warned David that he needed to flee or be killed by Saul. And she let him down through a window and put a decoy in the bed to look as if David was still in bed. And David fled to Rama. So let's read chapter 19, verses 7 through 17. Let's see, am I on the... Oh, I'm reading from the wrong line. I'm sorry. So we talked about Saul's plan to get rid of David with Merab, and didn't work out. So he offered his younger daughter, Michal. And what did he require as a dowry for Michal? 100 foreskins of his enemies, the Philistines. And for certain, David would go out against the Philistine, and there's no way he's going to kill 100 like that and survive. What happened? He brought back 200. Backfired spectacularly, didn't it? What was Jonathan's response? Well, let's see. How did his hostility grow in 19:1? How did Saul's hostility grow?
He orders his household, including his son, to murder David.
Okay, since the daughters backfired on him, maybe he can go through his son and get the job done. He must have known that Jonathan was really tight, but I guess he felt maybe Jonathan's loyalty was more to Saul than to David, and so he asked Jonathan to go out and take care of business for him, along with his servants. And what was Jonathan's response?
Jonathan went out and told David, who evidently he loved more than he loved his own father, because they were as one. And Jonathan's like a special king, so he goes out, lets him know that his father is out to get him, and he needs to be getting out there.
Yeah, he tipped him off, and I think Jonathan knew that the future was in David and not his father Saul. So he instructed him to go hide out, and then he went to his father Saul, and he kind of pleaded David's case for him. You know, David has done nothing but good stuff for him, and so finally Saul said, "Yeah, I think you're right. I'm not going to put him to death." Again, he's not a very reliable person when he makes a promise like that. And eventually he's reunited with Saul in the court, so he's back with Saul in the court. So let's read chapter 19, 7 through 17. See if I'm in the right place. And Jonathan called David, and Jonathan reported to him all these things. And Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as before. That's where we left off. And there was war again, and David went out and fought with the Philistines and struck them with a great blow, so that they fled before him. Then a harmful spirit from the Lord came upon Saul as he sat in his house with a spear in his hand, and David was playing the lyre. And Saul sought to pin David to the wall with the spear, but he eluded Saul so that he struck the spear into the wall. And David fled and escaped that night. Saul sent messengers to David's house to watch him, that he might kill him in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, told him, "If you do not escape with your life tonight, tomorrow you will be killed." So Michal let David down through the window, and he fled away and escaped. Michal took an image and laid it on the bed and put a pillow of goat's hair at its head and covered it with clothes. And when Saul sent messengers to take David, she said, "He is sick." Then Saul sent the messengers to see David, saying, "Bring him up to me and the bed, that I may kill him." When the messengers came in, behold, the image was in the bed with the pillow of goat's hair at its head. Saul said to Michal, "Why have you deceived me thus, and let my excuse me, and let my enemy go, so that he has escaped?" And Michal answered Saul, "He said to me, 'Let me go. Why should I kill you?'" Again, Michal was the younger daughter of Saul that was married to David after his plan backfired. And after more victories, this harmful spirit arrives again on Saul. And Saul tries once again to spear David and pin him to the wall, even stabs his spear into the wall. And Michal warned David that he needs to get out of there. And he did, and they came up with this plan for an escape where she would put a decoy in the bed. And he ended up fleeing to Rama, Samuel's hometown. And how did she help David escape? Kind of a common theme here that we see in the Bible.
Out of the window?
Let him out of the window. Where have we seen that before? Rahab, yeah. With the spies that spied out Israel, she let them out. I think, didn't the Apostle Paul had to escape out a window once? I believe so. So he was let out the window and escaped to Samuel's hometown. There's a psalm, I'm not sure we'll have time to read it, Psalm 59. It says in the question, it was written as a background to this event. How do we know that? Anybody look at Psalm 59? Well, if you take a look, there's an inscription right after the title that said, I think it says, "A Mictam of David when Saul sent men to watch his house in order to kill him." So whenever they compiled the Psalms, they indicated that this was, in fact, this event. And what do we know about Saul's state of mind from this psalm? David's state of mind from this psalm. It starts out, "Deliver me from my enemies, save me from bloodthirsty men." So he must have been pretty scared if bloodthirsty men was out to get him, and he considered them his enemies. So these are the messengers of Saul that had come to his house. In verses 3 through 4, he declares his innocence. So he felt that he was innocent of anything, and I think, in fact, he was. It was mostly Saul's envy of David that was causing this evil to come upon him. And in verses 6 and 7 and 14 and 15, it describes his foes as howling dogs prowling the city. You can imagine his state of mind with being surrounded like dogs coming after you, just closing in on you over time. And the other thing that I think sets David apart from Saul is in verses 9, 10, and 16, he places his confidence in God as his fortress that will let him triumph over his enemies. So he is very confident that even though he's in this great distress, that God will deliver him. And another thing that kind of sets him apart is in verse 11. It asks God not to kill his enemies, but he wants him to bring them down. But he does not seek for his enemies to be killed. A big difference between the first king, King Saul. Okay. So he flees to Rama. Yes.
That point you just brought, that he asked him not to kill them. Again, in other imprecatory psalms, he prays for destruction for his enemies.
Yeah.
But you'll notice as we go on, we'll see that David will not lift his hand against Saul.
Yeah.
Because Saul is God's anointed.
Exactly. In fact, he kills others who do lift a hand against Saul and other enemies. So he flees to Rama. This is probably a little hard to see. It's dark. Rama is the hometown of Samuel. Samuel's still alive. He was the final judge when they desired a king, and so he still has official duties. I don't think those have gone away just because they have been granted a king. And not only is Samuel a judge, but he also appears to be a prophet as well. And so David flees there. And one thing we'll read about a lot in the scriptures is that it talks about the scope of the kingdom being from Dan to Beersheba. So this circled spot at the very bottom of the map is Beersheba. That's the southern extent of the kingdom. And Dan is the northwest area up there. So you can see whenever you read from Dan to Beersheba, that means the extent of the kingdom of Israel at this point. Okay, so David escaped to Rama. Let's read verses 18 through 24 in chapter 19. Now David fled and escaped, and he came to Samuel at Rama and told him all that Saul had done to him. And he and Samuel went and lived at Naioth. It was told Saul, "Behold, David is at Naioth in Ramah." Then Saul sent messengers to take David. When they saw the company of the prophets prophesying, and Samuel standing as head over them, the Spirit of God came upon the messengers of Saul, and they also prophesied. And it was told Saul, and he sent other messengers, and they also prophesied. And Saul sent messengers again the third time, and they also prophesied. Then he himself went to Ramah, and came to the great well that is in Seku, and he asked, "Where are Samuel and David?" And one said, "Behold, they are at Naioth in Ramah." And he went there to Naioth in Ramah, and the Spirit of God came upon him also. And as he went, he prophesied until he came to Naioth in Ramah. And he too stripped off his clothes, and he too prophesied before Samuel, and lay naked all that day and all that night. Thus it is said, is Saul also among the prophets. So one of the things we read about here is Samuel and David go to a place called Naioth. Naioth is believed to be a school for prophets, and it's interesting that Saul sends 3 groups of messengers to go retrieve David, and they all end up prophesying as well. And for whatever reason, they don't deliver David, maybe as a result of the prophecies, I'm not sure what. And then Saul says, well, I got to take matters into my own hand, and he goes himself. Oh, we're out of time. And he goes himself and ends up doing the same. And so David's not delivered. And
Though is that we may not understand everything about what transpired here, but God delivered David.
God, yeah, that's a good point. God delivered David. Okay. So we had one more page here. We won't have time to go through, but what we do see is that Jonathan and David get together. They come up with this plan to find out if Saul really intends to kill him. Turns out he does. And so David has to flee yet again to a place called Nob, which we'll take up on Sunday. Thanks, everyone.